Another big story this week was the report from Hong Kong of a 33-year-old man who was hospitalized with COVID-19 in March and then tested positive again on August 15th, with genetic testing confirming that this was a reinfection and not prolonged viral shedding. So, Mike, is this a surprise or something that people should be concerned about? And what does it tell us about immunity?
Well, I have commented on many occasions on this podcast about the sense of durable immunity and how important this is. Is this immunity from infection or vaccines going to last 2 months, 5 months, 10 months? If it doesn't last, to protect you against getting ill again, does it make your illness less severe? And so we've anticipated this because we've seen this with coronaviruses in general. The cold coronavirus, if one looks at the coronaviruses that cause colds, if you look at MERS and SARS, this has been a hallmark of these viruses, so it shouldn't be unexpected. I think the concern we've had about previous information on potentially losing your immunity once you had it was that the early studies based that on these ongoing PCR positive test results, the tests that basically pick up the genetic material that's in your body that's being excreted out. We call it viral debris. And that can occur long after you've lost the ability to actually make full intact viruses. And so finally, it was well understood then that just excreting this for a long time didn't mean you were chronically infected or you got reinfected if you had a short period of time where you weren't excreting and then you started again. But what's happened here is the case in Hong Kong was an individual who was infected last March, who then was actually not only tested for the presence of the virus by PCR, but actually had a virus culture obtained. So they grew the virus out. Patient was very moderately ill, almost asymptomatic. And then the patient went to Europe 4.5 months later and came back. And in that time period, obviously came in contact with the virus again in Europe. Upon arriving in Hong Kong, was tested as part of routine screening, was found positive. They were thoughtful enough to go in and actually do a virus culture on him. They grew a new virus, and the virus was very different than the one that he had had earlier in the year, but very similar to what was circulating in Europe. So clear and compelling evidence that this was a reinfection. Because he was not severely ill to begin with in the first illness, he couldn't really assess was there a less severe disease this time, or the fact that maybe why he lost his immunity was because he had such a mild illness before that might be tied to it, the more severe illness you get there. Since that time, 2 additional cases have come out in the last 24 hours. One is an older person in the Netherlands, and another one is an elderly woman in Belgium, who both had very similar experiences to this individual in Hong Kong. And in all 3 of the cases, it's convincing that they were infected with virus A, a beginning, and 3 to 4 months or 5 months later, got infected with virus B. So what it does, it proves the concept that there is what we call waning immunity, at least, where it doesn't stay around necessarily to protect you against reinfection. Now, let me just take a step back from this, because there's different kinds of immunity that we're looking at, and what are the implications of this for the big pandemic? If one looks at the immune status, there's really kind of 4 categories we think about. One is called sterilizing immunity, which means either through having had disease or a vaccine, my immune response is so significant and so effective that basically I just don't get infected again. It literally shuts down whatever that infectious agent is, a virus, whatever, and there's really no growth at all. And I don't even realize I've been exposed to the virus. That's by far the best, and that would be great if you had that for a lifetime. That's not going to be the case here. I don't think any of us think that there's sterilizing immunity. Rather, there's functional immunity, and that is the kind where you have enough of a response where you may get a temporary infection, and you may not even realize you're infected, but in fact you are, and the virus is potentially circulating in you, but you have enough immunity that it's quickly wiped out, it's quickly gone, and you may not even realize you're infectious, or for that matter, hopefully even be infectious to others. That's probably what we're going to see in more of these illnesses, and often with functional immunity, you do see a reduction in the severity of illness. So that if I got really sick the first time, the second time I might get sick but much milder, and even if it's the third time, even milder yet. We haven't demonstrated that for certain yet with this COVID-19, but we're hoping, if anything, that may be where we're going to see some protection. The third category is waning immunity, where over time you have protection, and with it, basically, it's more effective the closer you get to the time you're either vaccinated or the time that you were infected itself. But that over time, with this, you can actually see that the immunity changes. And so you lose that protection potentially in weeks to months. And again, with this one, you would hope that the infection would be much less severe, though, meaning that it's not enough to stop you from getting reinfected, but enough to basically make it less severe. Then finally, there's just lost immunity. This really is where you just don't have any more protection. And we surely have infectious diseases like that, where a one-time hit doesn't make you immune to any subsequent hits later on. And that is one that's a challenge, for example, with vaccines. It's almost impossible to do vaccines. So to me, I think we surely are going to be confronted with what happens if these vaccines only work for a few months? What happens if the infection status only works for a few months? Our hope is, at the very least, that we just have milder and milder infections, and that it'll raise questions about revaccination, booster doses, when, how, and any of these scenarios that we see right now is still going to be a real challenge for much of the world. That if I'm encountering this virus for the first time, I'm still going to be in that same risk pool that we are today, or we were in March, in terms of having severe disease, even if I have a vaccine in this country or I've been infected several times. So stay tuned on this one. This is one where we're going to have some real challenges, and at this point, we just really don't know what this immunity means, other than the fact that we're going to have to confront it.